Good morning, everyone. Welcome to York Buddha Dharma. Our center is dedicated to understanding and teaching and learning about the teachings of Chögyam Trungpa, our teacher. We have been going through 3 volumes of a book called The Profound Treasury, and we're on volume 1, and tonight we're giving a talk on chapter 46. Judy Leaf is a student of Trungpa, and she's the one that compiled all of his teachings, which were the seminary teachings that he gave throughout the years, where he took a large amount of students, went off to a retreat somewhere, and then we all studied there with him for 3 months. And I saw her, Sasha and I saw her yesterday, and we told her that we had the study group and that we were studying volume number 1, and she was very happy. And there were other people there also studying all these texts, so it's quite an accomplishment that she did in this lifetime. Anyway, this is, the name of this chapter is called Glimpses of Emptiness. And it's about, there are 2 types of meditation. One is shamatha, which is more one-pointed, and the other type is being more expansive and being in the space. And I thought before we get into the chapter, we would just go back and just discuss the way the Buddha practiced and taught meditation. It also happens to be today's November 12th, 2018, and it's Armistice Day. And the last few days, there have been so many things going on in Europe, in France, because they're, I don't know if the word celebrating or marking the day of the soldiers that gave their lives in World War I, which was quite a while ago. And it just seemed kind of fitting to me when we were coming down here today. I was thinking, gee, it's Armistice Day. And, you know, like when we were hippies, we used to say, war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. You know, that's a song that, I don't know if you ever heard of that song. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. But then, that's true. But then on the other hand, you think of all the, I wouldn't say thousands, but like millions probably, of people, sentient beings, that have died in wars, that have given their lives for wars, that have been sent to war. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. And then on Facebook, all of these people, a lot of them I don't even know, but you know, we're friends. They've been posting pictures of their parents, you know, their fathers that were in wars, fought in World War I and World War II, grandfathers. I just was really looking at these photographs of these men, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I just don't even know. I mean, to have the courage to go and do something like that, to go off to a war, to be drafted into an army, to have your government send you to a faraway country, and fight a war on other soil. I mean, in our consciousness, can we ever even think about what that means, really? I don't know. My own father fought, you know, like he didn't fight, but he was drafted into the Russian army you know, World War II. And I mean, you can't even wrap your mind around it. But then you think about, and then there was one photograph of soldiers in World War One. This is panoramic view of, you know, they were all wearing very old uniforms, so it was World War One, and they were standing in the formation of a horse, in remembrance of all the horses and donkeys and animals that lost their lives during the war. Because, you know, if anybody ever saw the movie War Horse, Steven Spielberg made that movie. I've seen that film a couple of times because it's like such an exquisite film. And you know, I love horses, I mean, who doesn't? And it's about this horse that was caught up in the war. Anyway, and then, of course, all the tragedy that happens after wars. Like, people come back, like people that come back from Iraq, they have so many emotional problems. Today I was listening to the radio, and you know, they formed a group of you know, of soldiers that do comedy acts. You know, so they talk about their war experience. A lot of soldiers commit suicide in Iraq. I mean, in my generation, it was the Vietnam War. Anyway, I just don't even understand. I can't even really understand what war is, but it's all around us. So it's hard to avoid it or not to see. But anyway, when we think about the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who's the Buddha of our time, Prince Siddhartha, leaves his beautiful palace, goes into the forest, and for 7 years lived in the forest and worked with himself. So he started with meditation practice, and he learned from yogis in the forest, you know, all different types of practices, until he came upon this, what we do now, which is called shamatha, which is very one-pointed. And then he would, you know, get up from his little cushion, his little seat of maybe some kusha grass, sitting under a shaded tree, and he would do walking meditation. And that is more expansive. You walk into the space, and so we call that vipashyana meditation, expansive meditation. And then after he spent all this time in the forest, he came upon these, I think, 3 or 4 men who were students of this. They were all students of the same yogi teacher, and you know, in the forest in India. And they said, "Well, you know, Siddhartha, you look pretty good. What have you been up to?" And so he gave his first teachings. He didn't speak after he attained enlightenment. He didn't say anything. Because how do you even talk about it? Because he was literally the first one in our time. And so then he, you know, he talked about, let's say, the 4 noble truths of, he saw that there was really suffering. He saw that the reason that they're suffering because people cling to an idea of who they are, their concepts, you know, and today we could think about governments who think they know what they're doing by sending people off to war. And then he said, well, all of this comes from clinging to a self, to who we think we are, that we're solid people and we have ideas. And the governments might think, well, I don't like you and I think we're right, so we're going to kill you, or something like that. And then how to work with that energy through practice. So anyway, the Buddha, that's what he taught. So he taught what he discovered. He taught a practice to go with it, how to work with ourselves, how to work with the space around us, how to work with other people, and basically saying, first you work with yourself and then you work with others, which is what he did. He worked with himself and then he worked with others, and people formed around him and became a sangha. Like we have our group right here tonight. This is our sangha. And we're studying the teachings of the Buddha, and we're doing the practices that he taught. And basically, all of these practices that he taught was related to not causing harm to ourselves and not causing harm to others, and live in a peaceful way. Anyway, of course, he taught many, many students in his lifetime, and he gave transmissions, and his students became teachers, just like all of you are students and you're teachers, and eventually, if you haven't taught, then eventually you will teach. And then I was just saying to Becca and Amari that pretty soon you're going to be teaching, Lane, Sasha, all of you. John's a teacher. It's important for us to see the bigger picture, because it's just not about us. It's about working with ourselves and working with our space and working with other people so that we have harmony in this world. It's very important. Anyway, eventually, these teachings that the Buddha gave went into different countries, and one of the countries was Tibet. And our teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, was born in Tibet, and he received these transmissions from his teachers. When he came to the West, he learned how to speak English when he went to Oxford and studied comparative religion there. And when he came to the States, he realized that it would be a good idea to combine the shamatha, which is very one-pointed meditation and following the breath, to shamatha and vipassana, being aware of the space that we're in. So he called it shamatha vipassana. And it's very helpful when we practice to keep our eyes open and to relax in the space that we're in and work with our breath and just be in the present moment. Because while we're in the present moment, everything kind of seems to work out, because we create a space where we can accommodate our thoughts. We can accommodate our projections. We can accommodate the past and the present and the future and everything. It all works here. And we don't have to reject ourselves or anyone. And we all sit together as a group. Or we go home and we sit by ourselves. But it's you cannot underestimate the power of this practice. And the other thing that Trungpa Rinpoche always emphasized was to study the teachings of the Buddha. And he wrote many books, but many Tibetan teachers, and there are many books on the Buddha's teachings. For instance, one of the books that I have is called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which was one of the first books that Trungpa Rinpoche wrote. And John Baker was the editor, one of the editors. And the Profound Treasury, which is the 3-volume set that we're studying now. So you study, you mix your mind with the Dharma, you practice, and then shamatha vipassana, and this is how we flourish as human beings. This is how we work. So, having said that, and we'll go over the chapter that we're working on. And basically, Glimpses of Emptiness is basically it's a small chapter that's basically on the 3 different types of vipassana practice, meaning working with space. And I thought it would be a good idea to look up the definition of vipassana. And I can't remember, I may have gotten it in Cutting Through, which is the Bible. Everything is in this book. Or I may have looked it up in Wikipedia. But it's always good to know, I really feel like when we're studying, it's good to look things up so you know what words mean, rather than say the same thing over and over again, but nobody ever really knows what the word means. So they say definition of vipassana meditation is working with things in a more panoramic way. So when we keep our eyes open when we're practicing, we're not closed off with our sight. Our sight is open. Our ears are open. Our breath, our feelings, all our faculties are open in the space. And it's a more panoramic view of seeing the world. We must become aware of not only the small details of an activity, but also the situation as a whole. Vipassana involves awareness of space. Basically, that's what it is. So whenever you hear someone saying Vipassana meditation, it's what they're talking about is awareness of space. The atmosphere in which precision occurs. If we see the exact details of our activity, this creates a certain space. Out of this develops panoramic awareness, or Maha Vipassana. Maha means big. Maha Vipassana meditation, awareness of the overall pattern rather than focusing on details. We begin to see the patterns of our fantasies rather than being immersed in them. So you get it's the big picture. It's the big picture of our lives. And sometimes when we're meditating, we have the same thoughts over and over and over again, but if we just take more of a panoramic view, we could just become familiar with the same storyline that's always coming up. Anyway, so the three stages of Vipassana is called Chipa, this is Tibetan. Nurcho was acting like an infant. So you start out like an infant, crawling. Babies are like very small little baby steps, kind of like maybe looking around, seeing what's going on. When you look at it, when you have a baby, the baby looks around, see what's going on. If you take the baby in the stroller and they're looking everywhere and everything seems so interesting, but they're not really connecting to what it's all about. But they're just looking. And then the second step is Chögyam, which means equal taste. And then the third step is Teshin Nikpa, seeing things as they are. So let's just go over, okay, and it says here, I wanted to go over the Four Noble Truths, which I think I did. We don't have to go over that again. Okay, here's the three stages of Vipassana. Acting like an infant, level of meditation. That means just right from the beginning. You open your eyes, you practice, you sit, or you do walking meditation, but everything is just beginning to tune into the space. It develops from intense shamatha meditation, which brings up visions of emptiness. So when we're practicing meditation, shamatha, we're relating, in our practice, we relate to our breath. But you could do shamatha relating to a candle, or shamatha relating to an object. But we use the breath, the out-breath, because that's something you always take with you. You don't have to use any props. We always have the out-breath. And so we relate with the out-breath, and we're working with just being aware of the breath leaving our body, the sensation of breath leaving our body. And then while we're doing that, we could have like a little glimpse of some kind of like spaciousness, some kind of emptiness, because we're not just constantly working with thoughts. Maybe when we're more relaxed, we might just have like a little bit of space, and we see that there's a possibility that everything isn't so tight. And then he says, it develops from intense shamatha meditation practice, which brings up visions of emptiness. It could be hallucinations which do not exist. And hearing an orchestra or the ceiling caving in. So while we're practicing, I remember once when I first started practicing, I had this vision that it was such a long path that like this vast, kind of like a desert, a bleak desert. The path was, it was so enormous what I had to work with that I just was like completely horrified because it was so overwhelming. But then when we relax and go back into our space, then we can relax and calm down, relax with that. And the second stage is Chögyam, equal taste. This is a little higher stage, more like an adult. So you go from the infant stage to more like an adult stage. You begin to experience the Four Noble Truths and simplicity of awareness. The hallucinations may continue, but they don't mean anything to you. So you kind of like relax into the practice, and anything that comes up is workable. And also, Rinpoche said that the Burmese school of meditation, the country of Burma, which is something else, it's not called Burma anymore. What is it called?
Myanmar.
Myanmar, yes. He said that they have a practice that they really emphasize. There is also shamatha vipashyana, which I never knew that. So they combine that, where you're sitting in the space, relating to the shamatha practice, and then working with the space as well. And the third stage is tessen mikpa, seeing things as they are, perception, understanding, and knowledge. This is known as Maha Vipashyana, because now we're more seasoned practitioners, and it's like a child that, you know, starts first day of nursery school or kindergarten. It's not a baby in a carriage anymore. They can relate to kids. They know what kids are. You know, they relate to the space around them. They can play. They're not babies anymore. So we are now more seasoned practitioners. And then Rinpoche said, and then you really begin to experience some kind of emptiness in the space, that even though we see things around us, they don't seem that solid anymore, that there's a fluidity in our practice, and things are possible in the practice. Our psychological makeup, who we think we are, the embellishment we indulge in, and our thought processes are all non-existent. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because here you begin to see that even though we have this solid feeling about our life, that everything is a definite, certain way, when we start practicing, and we practice for a while, we begin to see that things are fluid, that they're not as solid, you know, they're not a definite thing. And because of that, we begin to see how we can work with the space in a different way. So for instance, governments might think that this is the way things have to be, but they could say, well, maybe we can take another look, and maybe there's another way of working with energy rather than the old way of aggression, let's say. Our psychological makeup, who we think we are, the embellishment we indulge in, and our thought processes are all non-existent. Because all of these layers of who we think we are and how we relate to the world, this is something that we learned. We learned that however we grew up, whatever our karma is, our family karma, our city karma, we just learned that. But it doesn't mean that that's really the way it is. That's just the way we see things. And once we start practicing, we may have some glimpses that we're not as solid as we think we are. And we can work with the energy in a different way. Anyway, Richard says we're inherently nothing, not as a meditation experience alone, but as a kind of fundamental devastation. We're so, it's like having the rug pulled out. Like sometimes you fall asleep and you feel like you're falling, when you're sleeping, and you wake up. You think, oh God, that felt horrible. But in a way, it's good news, because if things are not solid, that means things can change. And if things are solid, it means nothing can ever change. So Ranyam, because with Maha Vipassana, we have a glimpse that we are inherently nothing. Not as a meditation experience alone, but as kind of fundamental devastation. There's an enormous feeling of being helped out rather than helped in. We are pulled out of whatever realm we are in into a realm or psychological state that is completely empty. We begin to feel we do not have an origin and we don't belong anywhere. So that's really good news, even though it sounds horrible. It's good news because then there's an opportunity to take a fresh look of how, to work with ourselves and see what the world is around us. Today, for some reason, it seemed to be like one morbid thing after another, but I read this crazy article about two little, African-American boys in the South, I guess, years and years ago, many, many years ago, were like the little kids, like 6 or 7 years old, were playing with a white girl, and one of them kissed the girl on her cheek. And when the girl went home, she told her mom what she'd been doing that day, the mothers, one mother called the other mother, and they went crazy because 2 black boys kissed their little white girl, and they arrested these kids and threw them into prison. I mean, when we think about it now, the concepts that people have, what they think is right, that's the way our minds are, very, very solid. And when we do these practices, then we begin to see that our solid ideas about reality may not be based on anything at all. And so when we get to that point, we can just take a fresh look and see what's real to us, what's really going on in this world, and how we can work with ourselves and other people in a different way. We are pulled out of whatever realm we are in and into the realm or psychological state that is completely empty. The path we are on is a path of experience, but no longer a concrete path. So we're experiencing the world, but it's not a solid concrete world. It's not a piece of a brick. It's fluid. And then we don't have to see little kids are doing anything horrible to each other. They're just playing. That's it. They're just playing. They're just enjoying life. Okay. Something begins to take over and the path comes to us. We don't go to the path. So it's like we're not going for any kind of goal when we're practicing. We're open, we're spacious, we're relaxed, and then once we're open, then information starts to come to us. And we begin to see how things are workable, how things are in the nature of the world. We can go either way in our life. We can see it as a source of celebration because it takes us out of the realm of competitiveness. That's the thing. People have such a need to compete that they become completely frozen. And so when we're open and we're spacious, we can see it as a source of appreciation for our world, rather than competing with each other or with ourselves. And we realize that there's no ground, no one to compete with, and it becomes a source of joy. There's enough room for everyone in this world. There's enough room for us to express ourselves, to be who we really want to be, open. We don't have to compete with others. Like kids, like a mother was telling me the other day, or a child, a daughter applied for college, and do you think she's going to get in? Because, like everybody's so terrified. And I was like, there's enough room for everyone. We don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be afraid that someone's going to compete with us and throw us out. When Rinpoche used to talk about art, he would say there's a blank space, it's open, and then you just take one dot, and then from that dot comes this, creativity. But if we're so claustrophobic and we think that we have to compete, and what are we going to paint? What are we going to do that nobody else does? Then we can't really do anything that's creative in any way. Something begins to take over and the path comes to us. We don't go to the path. Practice becomes constantly apparent and in our mind all the time. So there's a lot of fear and a lot of concern. This can go either way in our life. We can see it as a source of celebration because it takes us out of the realm of competitiveness, or we can see it as a source of complaint so that our ideas can be solid and we can be appreciated. Anyway, basically, that's the thing with when we practice meditation and vipassana. Things are not solid anymore. We see movement in space, and so we can dance in that space, we can relate to other people in that space, and there's an amazing amount of freedom that comes up, even though it might be painful. When we practice, memories might come up. It's not easy. It could be very painful, and it is often very painful. But if we practice the technique of just being in space, then there's a lot of freshness that comes up too. And so we trust in the technique because it's handed down from a lineage of practitioners who have gone through the same situations psychologically and physically that we have. And then the bottom line is we have a glimpse of groundlessness. The closer we are to enlightenment, the more groundless we are. And egolessness, the closer we are to enlightenment, the less ego. And you always hear about this phrase, people always say ego, but what does that really mean? what does that mean, ego? Because I mean, I hate buzzwords, and that has really become a big buzzword. But ego means less grasping or identifying with a self. Because people see themselves as a solid self. This is what I believe, this is what I think, this is who I want to vote for, this is the government that I want, this is, you know, how I raise my kids. And like a lot of parents, you see, they have very definite ideas about how to be parents. But then when you have a child, you never really see that child. You only see your concepts. You never really see what does that child need, who is this person that I am the steward of for 18 years or something. What can I do to facilitate them? And so life becomes very difficult because we're not really connecting to another human being or the person we're married to or the people that we work with. We're always just in our head. And we say we're like this and they should be like this. And often those things never really work out. So there's a lot of conflict. And then egolessness, and he said, Rinpoche said, egolessness is the root of vipashyana. So when we stop grasping for ourselves, then we can, space arises, and then we can work with that space, and that's vipashyana. Since ego provides an ongoing ground and reference point, we are losing our foundation. Therefore, we are helped out. We lose our reference point, and we become thinner and thinner. Vipassana experience cannot be given birth to, developed, or taught unless there is some understanding of egolessness. Does anyone have anything to add to that about egolessness? It's like being frozen. You know, sometimes people are very frozen in space in their life because they feel so tied up in identifying with who they are as people. So they can't move. They can't connect. But it's not really a problem. I mean, you could see that this is the way we are, but it's not really a problem because if we practice meditation, shamatha vipassana, then everything is workable. We don't practice shamatha vipassana, then it becomes very painful. At the Mahavipassana level, we have been introduced to the egoless of self. And we are just about to be introduced to egoless of phenomena, but we haven't completely introduced it yet. You just have the flu of it. So it's like, it's a little hint of what's to come in our practice, but it's kind of like just a glimpse. And Rinpoche said that shamatha is a concentration practice, and even though, you know, like there's some meditators who can sit still for hours and hours and hours and very pointedly work with their breath or work with looking at an object or close their eyes and just, they're very, very, very one-pointed and they're really good at it. I mean, you can see meditators who never move. He said, but this kind of concentration could be, you know, a hunter could have it, like they're in the forest with their gun and they're waiting for Bambi to come by and they shoot Bambi, and it's a very concentrated technique that they have. And you know, you could even have it when you're, you know, a pianist or a violinist or whatever. People are brilliant in learning techniques, but when you talk about one-pointedness in the Buddha, from a Buddhist point of view, shamatha, we have some feeling for or an experience of egoism, which is no ground. So when you practice meditation from a Buddhist point of view, you don't want that tightness. You want more space. And the Mahavipashyana, the big view of Vipassana of space, is where we're headed in our practice of becoming really open out in the world. And that's the vipashyana, which is later on. And I just wanted to read the last page here from this chapter. Let's see. Last page. Okay. Mahavipashyana is influenced by the Mahayana. Rinpoche said, in ordinary language, shamatha is simply the experience of concentration. It has been said in the text that even hunters have shamatha. But then to shift from a Buddhist type of concentration or shamatha, you have to have some experience of or feeling for egolessness. And in the Hinayana and thoroughly absorbed in shamatha practice, your outlook and experience naturally become Mahayana-like. And Mahayana means you're working more, and Hinayana means you're working more with yourself, and Mahayana means you're working more with the rest of the world. So, unless you develop Vipassana and realize the importance of wakefulness, you will have only a very distant view of Vajrayana or even the higher levels of Mahayana. It is necessary to have that kind of basic training and growth. So Vipassana experience and practice is absolutely necessary for a person who follows the Buddhist path and really wants to understand the Dharma. Okay, so that's basically it. Does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to share?
Thank you, Rochelle. It was very interesting, and especially after reading this chapter, I was reading it on the ferry on the way to the center, and it's much more easier to understand whatever you hear a talk when you have read before. And my question is, when you listed the stages of meditation, the first one was yeah, infant stage, and the second one was equal taste, the one before emptiness, glimpse of emptiness. So can you talk a little bit more about the equal taste? Which stage is that?
That's stage number 2. Ronyan, equal taste. Let's see. Let me see what I would say. Equal taste. So this is more like the first stage is the baby stage, and this is more like more of an adult when you become more grown up. And it's a higher stage. You begin to experience the Four Noble Truths and simplicity of awareness. You begin to connect more to understanding how things work. Like you begin to understand, well, the Four Noble Truths, there's suffering in the world, I'm suffering, other people are suffering, you know. And then you think, well, what is the cause of this suffering? Well, I'm really clinging to an idea of who I think I am. Maybe, you know, I can work with that in my practice. I see some possibilities are opening up. Things don't seem so horrible anymore. Or if I have like an attack of, you know, some kind of klesha, like suffering, oh, I can just kind of seem to work with that. It's like things become a little bit more workable. That's what it is. Your world is not as solid as it used to be, as claustrophobic. It's like baby steps, but more grown up. You see the simplicity and straightforwardness of vipashyana, that space. And here, shamatha and vipassana are combined. So you get hallucinations, but they don't mean anything to you. It's like you can have like a little bit of a, like when we practice, when we first start practicing, it could feel very claustrophobic. So, oh, I'm not going to get through 10 minutes, forget about an hour. But after a while, you know, when you start to really relate to the practice, okay, you can feel like, I feel claustrophobic, I feel like the ceiling's falling in, or the floor is, you know, taken out from under me, but you know what I can do? I've been there before, I understand what's going on, I can relax, and I can continue and work with the energy. So it's more of an adult level. It's like when you're a child, you can't really cross the street by yourself. But when you get older, you know, you understand how to cross the street. Basically, you become more mature in your practice.
Also on the subject of this second stage, equal taste is what it was translated to.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that term kind of means the same thing, or if it hints at this idea of sameness, which I understand to be like a certain aspect of emptiness, where like everything just appears part of the same field. Everything that's in our perception kind of has this equal quality. Is there some kind of relationship there?
What do you think?
I don't know. He really didn't talk much about the second stage in the chapter.
He said, this is a little higher stage, more like an adult. You begin to experience the Four Noble Truths and the simplicity of awareness. So what was your question?
If there's this term, equal taste, is related at all to this idea of sameness? Or, actually, I'm not quite sure, but is sameness sometimes spoken of as suchness? Is that?
I think equal taste here means, I'm talking, I think I'm just going to relate to practice situation. Equal taste is, we're no longer thrown off by little things in our practice. We become more stable. So let's say the phone rings when we're practicing. We can like, you know, the phone's ringing, but that's okay, I'll get it later. I'm going to continue practicing. Or you have a thought that comes up, okay, well, I've seen this thought before. So it's a good thought or bad thought, it's all equal taste. It's not heavy, it's not like this is horrible, this is better. You know, it's more like even. One taste, equal taste. It's like, you know, if we go outside or we look out the window, it's sunny, it's raining, it's windy, you know, it's just weather. That's all it is. It's just weather. And so we're not like freaked out about every little thing. People, you know, say, "Oh, it's raining out. I hate the rain." You know, it's weather. That kind of thing. We're more. We can accommodate things in a different way. We don't have to be so influenced by what's going on around us, let's say.
Yeah, it seems like there's some relationship to me.
To you? Yeah. Like once Rinpoche asked the students to come to, you know, the center in Boulder, Karmazon, and they were setting up for something, or some teacher was coming or whatever, and then someone didn't show up, and then Rinpoche called them on the phone and said, "Why aren't you here?" And he said, "Well, I'm really sick." And Rinpoche said, "I'm sick too. You know, I have a cold, but I came." So sick, not sick, you know, not make a big deal about things.
Basically, he's talking about not complaining.
Yeah, not complaining. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. And we'll just dedicate the merit. We dedicate the merit. I'll just say it. Because whatever we've studied here or practiced today, we benefit us, and also we send out the benefit to others. By this merit, may all
attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of both old age, sickness, and death.
from
The ocean of samsara, may I free all beings.
by the confidence
of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of radiance risen bloom.
may the dark ignorance
of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you.